Hey everyone, this is Sunny Cadwallader with CadChica Sports, and this is a Tuesday 10 Extra. It is a Tuesday 10 first. I like discussing things with Troy Kirby. He was my guest tonight earlier on Tuesday 10 with CadChica Sports, and I had some more questions for him. So he's like, let's do some extra. So we're on the Tuesday 10 Extra. So hey Troy.
Hey, how's it going? I blocked out my entire Tuesday for you, so let's get this value going.
Well, there you go. I want to get back on this topic of social media because it's something I don't want to say that I'm passionate about, but you and I both have a pretty good grasp of social media in the sports space, what we think works, what we don't think works, if that does that make sense? What we think
Yeah.
doesn't work. I want to know what your positives and negatives are. You use it more than I do, specifically in the college space. What are some of the positives that you have seen as each platform has grown and been used in college sports?
I think one of the things I would call Stephen King syndrome is the worst, which is diarrhea of the word processor, and the idea that you just put on every little emotion known to man and every little thing, and you've got to comment on everything. And while that might be nice to comment on every little troll that comes into your world, I treat it kind of like I do with a nightclub, to where you're in my world, if you're on my thing, and if you decide to say something rude, and I've had those people, you just kind of block and report and don't even comment. But if people have a legitimate thing, I do think that's where the benefits of social interaction come from. I actually had it where wrote an article and some people didn't like it, but it allowed me to kind of look back and go, am I just being defensive? Am I merely being putting up my guard, or
Yep.
do they have a legitimate point? And I felt at the end, I felt they did have a legitimate point. They came from a place to where it was more. It wasn't something that I was intentionally doing that caused it, but the way of the phrasing. And I said, okay, I can see that, and I had it changed, and I apologized to the two people, because if you actually get genuine interaction, which is the whole point of social media, you're going to get some people that don't like your stuff. But if you get people that are genuinely interacting for the right reasons, you'll actually learn more about yourself and more about what you're putting out. And I think that's the best part of social media.
Do you think we are at I'm trying to figure out the way I want to phrase this question. Do you think we're at a not the apex of it, but at a point where we're going to start to see, and this has been discussed on Twitter before, you and I'm assuming you and I have both seen it, but we don't own our own content on social media. And this is not my original thought. I've heard people discuss this. We don't own our content on social media. Do you think we're going to start seeing an evolution of it to drive it back to the things that we do own in sports, specifically our own websites, or is social media so integrated now in sports?
Well, I definitely think that if you're only doing things on social media and not driving them back to your own content on your own websites, etc., you're really doing yourself a disservice, because honestly, any of these platforms could decide tomorrow, hey, we're not only not free, but that's all copyrighted by us. That being said, it still depends on the platform itself and whether or not people are going to be on it. I remember back in 2009, 2010, because I had had Facebook before, but nobody had really been on it aside from college. And I remember people telling me how Facebook's not going to last because MySpace is where everything's at. They had all their comedian stuff on MySpace, because I knew a lot of stand-up comedians. The funny thing is, now they're all on Facebook. It's just those transitioning platforms. It's whether or not you're willing to take your content and your followers and just say that's the only place I'm going to be. Because the other danger is you built up all these followers, and then one day if that platform decides to leave, or like Facebook has, where the algorithm changes. I have a small amount by comparison. I have I think like 1,400 people that on my Facebook fan page, but I barely ever reach those amount of people anymore, because they treat me just like a company. And I can only think that that actually harms not just the actual brands like ourselves, but say, what if you're the knitting club and those people that have really connected like that, now you're really not even reaching those people. It starts to make you not want to use that platform. But look at all that time that you spent building up those followers and building up that fan base. Now you have to go do it again in another social platform. So I think there is also that danger of they can change the rules automatically without you even doing anything about it. I know I've rambled on again, but you'll have
No,
to
that's
correct me.
fine. That was okay. This is the time for rambling because
Okay, because
I
she
rambled on
corrected
with
me
my question.
before. I want that in
Oh,
the record. She
jeez.
No,
Now,
but
come on now.
I mean, really, if you're going to look at a conducive thing, you have to look at your own content and how to own it.
Yep.
Your own content. I use a Libsyn, which is a service that does my podcast, but I also keep all of those files. And I've had people approach me and say, "Hey, I've got a great idea. I'll own your content, and we'll just have better reach for yourself." It's not what I want. Because number one, we're very capitalist in the sports industry. We love to sell people on another thing,
Yep.
but sometimes we do it to our own detriment. So we have to understand that sometimes it's better to keep that content to ourselves rather than sell it to the first buyer.
Well, you mentioned your podcast, and as you mentioned in the regular time, you're doing your 350th tomorrow. Was that right? Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide to do a podcast?
I will tell you that the origins of this originally come from long ago in a galaxy far away. In early 2012, my friend and I, he's a stand-up comedian, Andrew Ouellette, he had a podcast he was trying to start up, and so I was sitting in on it, and of all people we got to interview was the Octomom. So I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm, kind of like, okay, hey, how's it going?
Details. We want details on that.
No. But I mean, it was just kind of interesting. So, from that, I just kept going, well, I'd like to have my own podcast. And then from that, I moved out to UC Davis, and I was kind of contemplating around, and my friend Matt Harper had just left his job at San Jose State. He was moving up to the University of Oregon, and he stopped by for our first football game, and I showed him which is still one of my prized possessions. It's a Zoom H4n, which is a kind of podcast recorder in a way. And like if you look it up, it allows you to record via SD card. Still use it, and 2 mics, etc. And he goes, well, let's do something. And I said, I have this idea, but I don't know if it'd work, whatever. And he was like, sure, let's just pop it on and do it. So we did it about 8 hours before a football game. And I didn't really think much of it, but I threw it out there. And this is, a lesson to all those people that think, oh, God, everyone will be horrified by this. I threw it out there, and one of the assistant athletic director at West Virginia, Kevin Miller, reached out to me, who became episode 300, and reached out to me and goes, hey, I really like this. I hope you can keep this up. I still have that email. And from that, I started going, well, who else do I know? I know Rob Sine at the Pac-12. I'll just go interview him. And while I'm there, I'll go interview this guy. And so it just compounded. And really, by the time it was done, I started having more and more people that were involved. What's funny about it is one of the people I originally reached out to goes, man, that's just going to blackball you. This industry doesn't like to share stuff. You don't want to be part of that. That'll just hurt your image. What's funny about that is a year and a half later, he wanted to be on the podcast. And so, of course, he was on, and I won't tell you which one. But at the same time, he's thinking about doing his own. It's just when somebody originally does something, you don't usually calculate whether or not it's good, whether or not it's because it's hard to be the first person through the wall. Notice I didn't say first man. You can be first woman. That type of thing. I know that there's a lot of people out there who try to get into that scary thing of, well, I'm a female and this is a gender equity, they're going to be biased. You're going to get the creeps no matter what. You just got to go forward and just be a jerk. It doesn't matter. Just do your stuff. Because at the end of the day, if you're not worried about making yourself happy, which is what the podcast initially does, it makes me happy. And I've met so many young kids who have reached out to me, whether on LinkedIn, Twitter, and said, hey, this has helped me. I hope it doesn't change your life, but I hope it helps you if you want to get in the industry, if you're more curious about it, just to get a better aspect of it. Then that gives me pleasure. And that's the same with your stuff. That should give you pleasure in the sense that you're reaching out and people are following it and people are actually engaging. And that's the whole point. And we're a little crazy for doing it, but so what?
Yeah, we are.
I mean,
Everybody knows me. They know I'm crazy.
But that's the point, right? Like, shouldn't you be a little crazy? Shouldn't you? I mean, what are you doing? There are people. I know a guy that fixates on Legos all the time. That's his gig. This is my gig. But my gig is more public than his. I know people. I know a woman that writes novels, but never is published, and I still go back to it and I go, why don't you just put them out? Well, they're not this, that, and the other. And I said, who cares? If 5 people see it and they like it, or 5 people hate it, at least you got a reaction. Because if you just sit there and you worry about your characters and all this stuff, but you never actually come to the fruition of putting it out there, did you really create anything? Did you really do anything? I'm not saying you got to sell it. You just have to be able to put it out there so people can see. So, and it's opened a lot of opportunities. So I'm really always encouraging when people want to do podcasts, people come up to me for stuff. I've talked to a few people that have been guests on the show or whatever. I'm always encouraging, because here's the thing. They're going to have a different idea. Sonny's interviews are going to be different than Troy's interviews, and that's a good thing. We should never be afraid of other people and their embrace of the canon, because if you are, then you're really doing it for the wrong reasons. You're a petty person, and I don't want to know you anyway. So,
whoa, Troy, well,
I know, but come on, how many people have you met that are sour people that they're all protective of their little space? You're protective of your space because you're a jerk. Let's be honest.
And I'm trying to be nice about this. It can get that way on Twitter sometimes.
I agree. That's one of the things, and I used to find that I would, have the same kind of reaction sometimes. I would, when Facebook was new, it's like, you'd buzz people or whatever and think it was funny, and then you'd realize, wow, okay, they really got bothered by that. And it's like you have to pull back on that kind of image, and ask who you are. Are you the type of person that really acts this way, or are you just acting this way because you don't think there's any repercussions, or you think you're being funny? And the one thing I found out about all social media, there is no sarcasm button. So,
yes.
It sounds
we need to create one, though, Troy. Somehow we need to create it and patent it, and we'll be rich.
I don't think we'll be able to patent it because I'll own it, but okay. No, but I mean, really, you have to understand who you want to be and who you think you are, and just try to be those people. I've met a lot of young people that they'll talk about, well, should I do this? Should I do that? And it's like, I can only give you advice up to a certain point. And that's only my advice. But really, at the end of the day, you have to just really embrace that you are doing what's best for you. And whether that's in the sports industry or not, you have enough information. That's all you can get. So whether it's podcasts or whatever, I just fully support people getting more information.
I want to get on a topic that I haven't really talked to anybody about, but the more I've pulled back myself on Twitter by choice. Actually, a lot of my social media, because it gets to be noisy. It feels like there's hypocrisy going on, where you'll see do as I say, not as I do. A tweet will be this way one minute, and then you'll see the same person tweet in a totally opposite mindset the next minute, contrary to what they originally did. So I want to get your perspective on how social media. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say it. How does social media bring out the real person? Does that make sense? What I'm asking. I mean, does that make sense?
Here's what I'll tell you is I was talking to a friend about why I like. There's a comedian, Doug Stanhope, and I like Doug Stanhope's him on the podcasts. I don't really care about his comedy, and I'm not trying to offend his comedy, but it's just, to me, that seems like it's more contained, it's more crafted. What I like about a podcast, or whether it be social media, you get to look at the person after 3 hours, after 20 tweets, and you get to really evaluate that person, because unless they're really keeping their guard up, and unless, and by the way, when they do that, they sound more plastic. you get to understand who that person is, fully. And so, when they have their little rage monster moments or whatever they're, doing on those types of things, you get to understand, who they are. I try to be a good person. I'm not always going to be a good person. There's always things that get me angry. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's like when somebody reaches out to you and they say something, I take more of a valuation if they've got a headshot than if they've got a little egg. Like so, and one tweet or whatever. But here's an example. So I was back on Memorial Day weekend, and I was following Spirit Airlines. Hashtag Spirit Airlines if you ever want to see what people complain about the worst airlines ever, because they have $59 airline tickets, and they charge you more for carry-on than they do for check.
Oh my goodness!
Just like the leg room's like this far. So I started retweeting those. And I got like 2 or 3 people, hey, what are you doing? This is horrible. Why are you doing this on my feed? And I was really angry from it. And then I decided to reach off to them DM-wise. And what I found was maybe they did have a point that I shouldn't, do, like so many retweets, whatever, because I did probably like 5 or 6. But I also thought...
Well, that's chump change to me, Troy.
I know, but that also I was thinking... So it almost ruins the joy of social media, which is, hey, check this out, because people then want it to where you're only concise and you only do one little thing. And then, so I'm wondering, does that make you more plastic, and do I need a secondary social media where it's just my own, but it doesn't say Troy, it just has something empty, to where I can follow and do whatever. It's kind of a weird mix. You have to be okay with it. Now I've just decided to favorite a lot more stuff. But now they have it on Twitter where it shows your favorites. Sometimes I want to favorite something, but I don't want people to see what I favorite because,
I know.
Yeah.
When I first saw that when they first made those recent changes on Twitter, I looked at how many favorites I had. I'm like, oh my gosh! So I went through and I got rid of a whole bunch, and I still have too many. But that's okay.
You unfavorited your favorites?
Yes.
Wow. See, but I know, and
I have like 700 still. So.
But that's the thing is, like, you look at it and it changes. So social media changes so much. I don't know, whether or not it changes who we are. I do agree that sometimes it makes us more of a jerk. Even when we don't tend to be. And I don't know really if there's ever a cure for that, because I think sometimes people are joking, and then other people have just taken it to the nth degree on every single thing. And, I just think that, it's honestly, you have to come from it from a place of trying to be nice and trying to be joyous, and if people, try to bring you down, it's just like in anything else. So, you got to try to be happy, right?
Yeah. Do you think journalists, media, should show more of their personality, or because I see a lot where they'll throw out a sarcastic comment or a very negative comment about someone or something, but when someone tries to challenge them on a story they wrote, the person that's tweeting back at them is wrong. Do you see where I'm getting with that?
I agree with that. Here's the thing, and this is part of my Eastern degree was Steve Blewett at Eastern Washington University, so I have to say that because he'll otherwise not be happy. But there is a what he called the line of demarcation. You have to be, if you're going to be a journalist and a straight journalist, that means that you have to be impartial to what you're reporting. And when you show opinion, you become a columnist, and you really can't judge on the same aspect of facts because you're now taking that away by saying I have an opinion. And that doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, but that's one of the problems that I've got with, say, some of the new websites that have come out to where, yeah, they show some information, but they also do it from a standpoint to where they not only have an opinion, but it almost a set agenda. And I think it ruins what reporting is, because real hardcore reporting, and this is where I do get into the holier-than-thou aspect of journalism, is you are not supposed to have an opinion. You are reporting the facts. You were there. This is what you saw. This is how much information you gathered. You're trying to convey that. when you start to put an opinion in things, that actually gets me to stop believing as much in it, because now I start seeing it as an agenda. And I think that's where social media has kind of ruined it, because now blog posts have become, and look, I'm living by the sword that I'm
Yes.
killing other people by,
We both
because
are.
like, well, but at the same time, I still come from an idea that I'm giving you an opinion. I'm not saying that these are the only facts out there and this is the only news. And that's one of my problems with it, is when people do that, or when they're insulting to people. When there's, certain ESPN reporters that like to say what you don't understand, or I don't think you understand, or I don't think you've got it, and they're really kind of, I guess, condescending. That probably makes me less likely to appreciate what they have to say. And you just have to reach that higher ground. I think that's tough.
You can add USA Today, you can add CBS, you can add Sci, you can add all of the different networks.
Yeah,
not just ESPN.
But what's funny about that one is that those are some of the reporters that I respect. But here's the other thing. I've had some great conversations with some of the, like, I'll take an ESPN reporter that I really like, Freddie Coleman. Mm-hmm. I've DM'd him offline, talked to him, whatever. Do I expect him to, tell me the ways of the world plus 10? No. But at the same time, he's still been a decent human being, and I've been a decent human being back. I think some of the vitriol also comes from, there's, an unfortunate thing that happens in this culture recently, and I think it's fame. Like, one of the things that bothers me, I was actually talking to the sales gorilla, Bill Gertine. I saw him in Orlando, and I said, I have to pull myself back every day to make sure that I'm not showing an ego. Because the second you show an ego is the second I think that you're a problem. And I don't mean to say that I don't have an ego, because I would love to have, like $50 billion like everybody else. But at the same time, when you say things that don't make yourself self-aware, it shows how unaware of yourself you are. I guess I phrased that right, so that works, right?
I know whoever's going to watch this later, they can't see me, but I am just nodding my head to everything that you are saying. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you, either personally or professionally at UC Davis, utilizing social media?
I don't think it's ever been a problem. They've always just said, hey, just go with it and kind of, do your thing, but don't say you're literally speaking for UC Davis. I mean, I work there. It's on my LinkedIn, and, that's cool. But, you'll never see me specifically, say that this is right, this is wrong, because I don't believe that I should have the right to question senior administration decisions where I work. It's also an employee thing. I totally get it. So, but I also don't comment on other people's firings. I also don't comment on other people's hirings, not only at my place, but also at, other organizations. Because I also feel I don't know the situation. The person that could have gotten fired could have been a nutball. Like, you don't know. How many people have you met that, it's like, geez, oh, this person's great, and then you actually work with them, and you're like, this person's insane, and I'm, glad I don't. Well, you know what I mean. So, on those kinds of inferences, you just have to be careful. And as long as you're leaving out, the company you work for, and you're doing your own thing, I don't think that a lot of times they really have a problem with it. I mean, I think that, it's been supportive in silent ways, and that's been by letting you do your own thing. So, and that's something I actually learned from Bill Chaves at Eastern. So, just do your own thing, and don't interfere with things that you really don't have a say in. So I agree.
That makes me think of the question in Twitter bios or whatever bios you have, like on Instagram or whatever. You say who you work for, but these are your own opinions. I've gone both ways on that with people, and when I read their bios. Yes, your tweets are your own, but are they? If in your bio you are saying who you actually work for, or it says who you work for in your Twitter handle. How do you feel about those kinds of caveats? These are my own opinions, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I'm not owned by a company, So B, I donate my time for a set amount of wages to a company who then, by virtue of that, gives me a paycheck at the end of the day because of the amount. So if they choose to end that or sever that agreement, they can do so based on the idea that I did not reflect the opinions or live within the standard of their stuff. That being said, I also think that some people carry that way too far as to believe now they are part of. I am a little authoritarian when it comes to, I get that somebody can tell you what not to say at a certain point, but I also just put sports industry veteran. Unless it's LinkedIn, you really don't see anything to do with UC Davis. And it's not that I don't respect the company or whatever and keep within those guidelines, but also I don't want them to think that I'm an official port of UC Davis, like that I'm giving out official news to them. And I think that's important. As long as you separate yourself in that certain sense, I don't know that they necessarily would have a problem with it. You know what I mean? Whatever
should
company.
people do that? I guess is my next question then. Should people actually put both who they work for and these are my own tweets, these do not represent my employer kind of thing, or just leave out the whole employer thing altogether, or is it necessary?
Well, let me ask you a question. So Justine Sacco, did
That's
it matter
what? That's who I was thinking.
But did it matter actually whether or not she said those things, or did it matter whether she worked for a large conglomerate company? Wouldn't have mattered. She worked for Match.com of all people. I would think that that shouldn't have been in her bio. But if that would have been in her bio, what would have mattered? She wouldn't have kept on, keeping her job. So I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it either way. I just think that it doesn't matter as long as you're saying things publicly. If I decided to say a bunch of stuff that was in, I guess, the format of the Westboro Baptist Church, I'm not. But if I were, I would not expect that my employer, when seeing that publicly, would necessarily keep the agreement with me to continue my employment. I don't think that it matters whether or not it's on social media or not. It matters whether or not you're basically not in line with the views of the company. So therefore, when you sign that agreement to be an employee, that's part of the agreement. So I guess I come down on that, but I do get a little anti-authoritarian when people say, well, you can't ever say anything. Really, I can't ever say anything? That to me is a little bizarre. I can believe that I can't say things which do not live within the guidelines of your organization, but beyond that, that's getting into 1984, and I would definitely get offended by that. I wouldn't work for an organization like that. I don't know if you would, but I wouldn't. So
I had it was a question that I'd been marinating in my head whether I wanted to ask you in the main show or not, but so that's why I brought it into this one. So you said you used to work with the Spokane Shadow.
Mm-hmm. Brett Sports, yeah. One of the first sports job I ever had. So.
Were you with them? This is more like this is not work-related stuff. Sorry, everyone who's watching it now. Were you with them when they started the youth Spokane Shadow?
There was it Skyhawks or the Shadow, the background
Skyhawks
one. Jeff was the GM. Of that, but he was also, and Stuart Saunders. Stuart Saunders is a great guy, but Jeff, and I can never think of his last name.
Robinson, I think, wasn't it?
Robbins, Jeff Robbins or Robinson?
Yeah, something like that.
Here's my lasting image of Jeff. Two things. Number one, he got so angry at a referee after the game that he's in our office, and the referee turns around, folds his hands, and goes, "I'm not talking to you anymore." While Jeff's yelling at him. So, and then the second thing was the Yakima Reds, because we did not like the Yakima Reds.
I remember that.
Absolutely disliked them with a passion. I had never interacted with the Yakima Reds, but they were singing in their showers at Joe Albee after they beat us like 1-0, and he just walked up, looked around in the hallway, and pulled the fire alarm, and their entire locker room got wet. So that was the second thing that I remember. But the Shadow days were fun. I actually met, of all people, Jim West. He was actually on the, and this was before the scandal, actually on the, so it shows that there's strange kind of interactions, but he was actually on the field for the Far West tournament that we held there with it was the youth thing that went on, and we had 18,000 people on Father's Day. You never know who you're going to meet, but Bobby Brett was always a great guy to me. When I go back to Kansas City, I'm actually going to, the keynote speaker at the ALDS, the Association of Luxury Suite Directors, is George Brett, so I promised to get him. I'm going to get a picture with him because I'm going to say, hey, you are one of my owners. You probably never met me, so this is going to be fun. So you get to hobnob sometimes. So
make sure you post that because I want to see that. That's pretty cool.
Definitely. It'll be like him and Lord, which he did recently, and she was just kind of like, yeah, hey, how's it going? So I don't know if you heard the history of that. He apparently was the inspiration. A picture of him in National Geographic was the inspiration for her song Royals, of all things. So there you go. You learn something new every day.
I did not know that either. No, the reason why I was asking is because my daughter, she was on the Skyhawks team that became the Shadow that next season. So that's why I was curious. So that's how I know Jeff, and I remember Stuart, and I remember all of those days. So that's why I was asking you that question. Well,
and I did do some officiating on the scoreboard for Skyhawks games and Shadow or whatever. So I may have met her by accident because you never know. It was Joe Albi was a fun stadium. It was the only stadium to where you could literally run up 10 miles and still only be halfway up the stadium. If anybody wants to see what Joe Albi Stadium looked like, there is Vision Quest, which is a movie that everybody in Spokane owns. But there's the scene with Shoop, and he's got the big log, and he's walking up the thing. That's Joe Albi Stadium. And it's massive. It could be hit with a nuclear bomb and still stand. And I just remember when Jeff would tell me, hey, I know that you're a PR director. I know that you're an account executive, but guess what? Now you get to clean out the press box. And we go into the press box with these brooms and try to clear out all of the birds that had nested there over the spring, which was fun because it looked like a John Woo movie where all the doves start shooting out.
Oh, yikes!
Yeah.
I don't know. And you remember Dwight Merkel, the North Complex, now Dwight Merkel Complex. I don't know if you know how transformed that whole area is.
No, when I saw it, it was always a lonely thing of rubble. So it was an interesting place to drive into. And then, Andy Billig was an inspirational guy to me too. He was the VP of the Shadow, I think the VP of the, or maybe the president of the Chiefs at that time, but I know he's president and co-owner of the Indians as well. Always come up in his red BMW, but now he's a state senator. And, couldn't be happier. But he always talked about, you can't be a total rebel, but you also can't be a total copy because neither of those survive. So you got to find an equal middle.
Well, place now. I'm trying to see if I can Google pictures of it now. Oh, let's see. I'm gonna do a screen share. Yeah, this makes for a great show.
There you go.
All right, hang on. Let's see. Okay. There's some huge fields now. There is, I don't know if you can see this one, a softball complex.
Yeah, that was not there. That would have been fun.
This whole area is paved parking. Let's see if I can find another one.
When Joe Albi Stadium, when I was there, they had an emergency thing, and they had all of the people from one of the power plants meet up there as the only place that would be like a safe place. They had big alarms. I thought the end of the world was coming because it was those big kind of air raid sirens that kind of whirl up, and we didn't even know that we had them. So it was kind of an interesting adventure. I would never replace my Spokane Shadow stuff because I have to tell you that the one thing that I learned from both Bobby Brett and Andy Billig is the price of a ticket should never be lower than what you sell it at. So honestly, if you're going to sell it at $13, You never make it lower. You never make it 50% off. You never make it $2, all that kind of stuff. And when you do value the people that bought at the original price. So
Okay.
that's always been a big thing. And sometimes getting people to catch up with that in college has been interesting. But I really firmly believe in it. So.
Well, here's just below the softball complex is humongous green fields where normally in this picture it's the spike and dig volleyball tournament, I think.
Wow.
But it's football or soccer fields, and then just to the left, lower or to the left of it, you can't see it right now, but that's where Joe Albee is compared to what it used to be. So.
Yeah, used to hang out and eat my lunch with the Joe Albee. He was a statue. He sits there in the far end near the concession stand at one of the sidelines. But I think he was a sports writer, I want to say at the time, or something.
I don't remember.
No, good guy. Good guy. Always had a good stadium name, and there you go. So
yeah, that's where Washington State holds their spring game every year now. At least the last couple of years.
Which, as they should, and I'm more than thrilled that they want to take into Spokane. Why they have never done that, and they didn't do it under Stirk era, always kind of amazed me. I'm not trying to be critical, but you have 500,000 people, 250,000 people are in that area, 500,000 people on that side of the state.
Yep.
You got to grab everybody. So,
yeah. It's been interesting watching what Bill Moose has done, and what I respect about him is could be applied to anybody. He has a vision, and he's got a plan, and he's doing whatever it takes to carry out that vision and that plan at Washington State. You agree, disagree, whatever you want about what he does, but that can apply to any small business or sports or out in the general sector.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was amazing was he actually has that little list, no bowl tickets. And I know some people get upset by that and think that's ego-driven. That's also a reminder. It's pay to play. And as much as people want to give lip service to it, I'm sorry, but budgets are being cut all over the place, and I fully support it. I actually sent him an email. He sent me one back, because I said, out of the blue, I said, you don't know me, but I met him once. But, hey, look. I love that. I love the fact that you're doing that. I fully respect the fact that you respect your price point. Thank you. And I agree with that fully. I think that there are too many people out here that honestly in this world that think that they can undercut the thing, then tell you to win, and then get mad when you don't have the funds to do it. And you honestly have to be from a place of we're charging for a reason. We're charging because that's what we have to do. And if that means that we have less people in the building, but we have more people respect our price point, I think that's the way to go. If Sunny buys tickets for 4 people and she spends $120, and then they let me have those tickets for $4, and I sit right next to you, how do you feel?
Not happy.
Are you sure? Because everybody else inside that does sports that considers themselves a good marketeer says, oh no, Sunny will be thrilled because there's more people there.
Yeah.
Sunny's not worried about that. Sunny's worried about her pocketbook and the fact that she just got kind of screwed over on some tickets. So I think that's where you're hurting the legitimacy of not only your price point, but how people feel about your tickets. Would you ever buy those tickets if you found out they were cheaper at the $40 normal price? If you found somebody else was getting them for free or cheaper, I mean, you would be upset. So that's where, and by the way, social media has actually been one of the best boons for this, because anybody who says they got something for free, everybody else gets ticked and goes, why? And then they want to know how they can get it for free, and that compounds. So some of the old sports marketing tricks that used to be prevalent are finding their way down kind of the rabbit hole and kind of hopefully disappearing. So hopefully disappearing with like the purple dodo.
And getting back to that, our very first question on the regular time show, that recent article, sketching, what's coming up for UC Davis, or can you fill us in on any of the upcoming plans for UC Davis?
I really don't get into that. I kind of said,
I had
because
to ask.
I don't, but I don't get into that territory. What I know, we put out there, but I do think we have a great sports marketing department. I think that honestly, Scott Brayton's one of the best in the business. So he'll be shocked I said that sometimes, but he's been doing it for 22, 23 years. So at UC Davis, so he knows the market. But what I will say is that we're always trying to innovate, and we're always trying to do things that are better for us, and I think we're on a good path. And I think everything I've ever done, under Terry Toomey has been great. So I've always felt fostered and developed. So.
And do you learn? This thought just popped into my head because the World Cup is going on. Are you able to learn new strategies, new techniques from a huge event like the World Cup or maybe the Super Bowl? Maybe not necessarily from a team standpoint, but are you able to learn what fans are thinking or new strategies that certain brands are using? Can you use that in what you do?
I think you can, but you can also learn it from a place that does 500 tickets. And you go, how does a place do 500 tickets and sells out? It really comes down to everything should be good artists create, great artists steal. So that's Picasso, Da Vinci, Bill Gates. All those people have at one time used that thing that comes from the Pirates of Silicon Valley, but that still works, so I stole it again. So essentially, you have to realize that every single time that you go to anything, you interact with anybody, it's an opportunity to learn. There are things that I have learned since I've gotten in this business, that have just been remarkably different than the thoughts I had before. And some of them come from the biggest events. Some of them come from the smallest events. You never know where that is, but that means also paying attention. And sometimes the big place doesn't even realize that they're doing it. That's what's also fascinating. There are some places I've walked into and I've said, wow, they really don't have it, or they have it, and I can't believe that they're not exploiting it. So it just depends.
What's the best way to learn?
Best way to learn is always to be open with it and never to say, I've got it and I know it. I never a day goes by that I don't learn 5 new things that I didn't know before and that I have to accept, and that's part of not having an ego or allowing your ego to do it. You have to accept that you don't know everything. We were talking offhand, I'm 38. I can't wait to be 40 because I'll realize everything I learned when I was 30 and everything I learned when I was 20, completely meaningless. It just comes with over time. When you're not trying to learn, when you're not trying to embrace it, that's when you fail. When you try to say, I don't need that. Have you ever noticed people that fail? They typically do so in spectacular fashion by ignoring trends or ignoring new stuff that comes up. I'm sure there are people that said Twitter wouldn't take off, Facebook, etc. In fact, you could probably see the movie, I'm sure. There are enough people in there that thought it wasn't going to happen. You just have to be able to accept it.
What do you foresee, because there's so many different social media platforms, social media channels, you have startups, you have Facebook and Twitter and Google buying this and buying this and buying this. Do you see it continuing in that road to where we'll have just like the superpowers of social media, or will we continue to see startups?
I think you'll have startups, but it'll just be, okay, look at your cars. The majority of your cars are under 4 companies. Eventually, even if you have a startup, here's the sad thing that you'll find out about startups. After a while, when they become the industry, they become the big dogs on campus, they begin to push legislation and to find ways to stop new startups from being able to grow. Look at Forrest Tucker, and you can see exactly why cars couldn't do it. Suddenly there were safety regulations there never were before. I'm sure now with the throttling of the internet and all the stuff they're looking at doing, that means that possibly a Google or a Twitter or a Facebook will survive because they'll have the money, but new startups may not. It just depends. But I definitely think what you see is people end up protecting market share. But then new industries grow out of that because of the frustration that they couldn't get in the old one. I mean, that's why the computer industry changed. The computer industry was completely different. I mean, where do you buy your computers from? 3 companies, and Microsoft isn't even one of them. They just do software. But smartphones are just two companies. Amazon was talking about actually opening up a smartphone. Good luck. It's either an Android phone or it's a Apple phone. Those things kind of even themselves out, and then they start to choke out the competition, and then something new grows and a new industry grows. So that's the beauty of not only capitalism but crony capitalism. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry to bring you down.
That's okay. No, you didn't bring me down. It's just our time has to be done because I have a son that I have to get to piano here pretty quick.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say I have to make dinner at some point.
Well,
I have to
that
eat.
too, but hey, leftovers, there's all kinds of stuff in the fridge they can get. But thank
Oh,
you.
good. Well, hey, I enjoyed this a lot, and anytime you want to do an overtime and talk about anything, apparently, I'm more than happy
I
to talk
know.
about anything. So, what are your political
A to Z to J to X, I think.
what are your political stances on 1912 politics? I don't know. I'll
Spokane
answer it.
Shadow.
Yeah, there you go, Spokane Shadow. Hey, thank you very much. Go Eagles, and I really appreciate you having me on. This is fun.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. I enjoyed the extra time, and if you didn't catch the regular time show, go to CadChicaSports.com and you'll find it there. Thanks, everyone.